Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Society Pod. I am out here choosing my guests in a very strategic and intentional order. And you probably tuned into episode 1 with Hensley, and she's amazing. Episode 2, this guest is no different. He has spent his entire career in fitness, working on household brands like 24 Hour, Lifetime Fitness, Gold's Gym, and now Les Mills. But more importantly, extremely more importantly, he is my podcast angel. He was sent from above to help me launch my podcast. So please welcome to the show, Khaled Elmarsi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Why don't you kind of kick things off and I gave a very brief bit of your bio, but why don't you give a more thorough bio of yourself?
Well, first of all, congratulations. I know you and I have been talking about launching your podcast for a few months now, so I'm proud of you. Congratulations for doing it. Episode number 2 of many to come.
Number 2, we're out here doing it.
Yes. So like Jessica said, my background in the health and fitness space for about 23 years. I started as a trainer and then worked my way up to fitness director, fitness manager, some of the bigger brands, 24 Hour Fitness, Lifetime, Gold's Gym. And my last stint was 3 years with a local brand here in Dallas as a director of fitness. And then as of recent, made the jump over to Les Mills as a business development manager with Les Mills.
We have so many different things we could talk about, and we're going to try to talk about all of them. But I want to start with your podcast, because obviously, so you and I met face to face the first time ever in November, and I knew you had a podcast, and you started to call me out on the fact that I wanted to create a podcast and hadn't yet. And I think what you did to help me get over the podcast hump was you made it sound easy, which it's not, but you made it sound doable and approachable. And I also said, I'm not good at any of the technology and any of the tools or anything like that. And you said, I will help you. And you get to so many people in your career who say, I will help you. And then when it comes to actually helping, they're nowhere to be found. And when I message you a question, you are immediate response back. Here's what to do. Here's the platform. So I feel like I owe you so much I am in a podcast debt of gratitude. But let's start with your podcast, because anytime somebody does something outside of their 9 to 5, to me, it's just amazing, that you care that much about it, that you're putting in those extra hours. So what is your show? What is it all about? And maybe most importantly, why are you putting the hours into creating it?
Yeah. So the name, my show's called Rise Up the Show. And it really, I took a different approach, right? It's more of I want to bring those on who are successful and have been successful and currently successful, but I want to tell their story. And part of it was just, I think a lot of it with me going through the industry. And there was a point where I had my own company. I used to put on fitness conferences here in California and in Texas. And part of that was always, you always see kind of the end result, right? You see the success and the money and the car, whatever, the success. I wanted to find out more about the journey. And so Rise Up the Show takes that approach on, look, there was little, we call them rise up moments that you took along the way to get you to where you are today. And part of that is just, what were those moments? Because if you went a different direction, you wouldn't be Jessica who you are today. But because you took those moments and you went in and took the risk, you are who you are today. And so the whole premise of the show is highlighting those moments and telling that entrepreneur journey. And I think it feeds into my curiosity. I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon, and so moved to the United States when I was 5. And so curiosity for me is part of who I am. It's part of my essence. And so it also feeds into my curiosity of just wanting to get to know people and find out more about what makes you who you are.
When you and I did the podcast together, you warned me. You said, I do so much research on all of my people, and we're going to go way back. We were talking about things from the age of 8 on. So we'll link that episode into the show notes, and you'll be able to do all of that backstory on Khaled's side. But of the people you've interviewed, besides me, who's your favorite? Who's the favorite person that you've ever interviewed, and why?
Ooh, that's a good one, man. So my favorite, he's one of my best friends. His name's Anthony Trucks. I think it was my second or third episode, and his story is amazing. Former NFL player, now motivational speaker, but came up through the foster kids care system, and just his journey and just trials and tribulations and being abused as a child and going from foster home, but then being able to come out of that a professional athlete and now coming back and sharing that story. You got to check out Anthony Trucks. He's actually, that was probably one of my favorite, besides yours, that's one of my other favorite episodes.
That makes sense. We'll link his also in the show notes. You can listen to those top 2 of Khaled's podcast, mine and then his second
Perfect.
guest.
Perfect.
Who is on your list of your dream podcast guests? Because I'm creating mine right now, and it's very exciting to think through who I would love to get to talk to someday.
Oh yeah. So you see the shirt, Art of Taste Syndicate. So I know you and I both follow Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. So those are my top 2. But I also know you need to be north. I know for Andy Frisella to be, even for him to think about coming on your show, you need to be at 100 episodes because he wants to see that you've done the work and been consistent. So I'm halfway there. I'm almost at 50, and then we got another 50 to go. So Gary V's another one. I'd love to get I know you're a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan, so I'd love to get Gary V. Nick Saban. I'm a huge Nick Saban fan. I love his process systems, the way he leads. So I would say those are my top 4 that are my kind of top 100 podcasts.
All right. We're going to tag them also when we post this, just to call people out and get your next guests.
There you go.
I know you gave me advice way back when in November, but what advice would you share with someone who's listening to this and is truly thinking about starting their own podcast?
I think part of it is it's don't let who you're not stop you from becoming who you are. And because we weren't all podcast interviewers, and we didn't know how do I ask the right question, and who do I bring on. I think we make it, we make it way too complicated. And so part of that is you've got to remember you're just talking to another human on the other side of that screen who's gone through their own journey and their own challenges, and you never know, their story might impact somebody that listens to your podcast. So don't let that be the reason not to do a podcast.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's probably like a quotable element, like don't let who you're not impact who you are. And I think that's oftentimes what's in our head, of that just imposter syndrome of just posting things that seem cringy, but it's part of the journey and who we are right now. We're getting better. We're literally like improving every episode or improving every day in our careers, like wherever we're at. So I know Ed Milet is great about giving his guests flowers, and I'll just give you flowers. The fact that you were willing to help me, number one, but then followed up on things and held me accountable. And I'll have to check the date that you messaged me and said, "Hey, where are you at with your podcast?" Kind of calling me out, like, "Are we doing this? Are we going to go for it?" And I think it's so important to have people like you in your corner as you're trying to build things, because there are moments where you have that uncertainty, like, am I really good enough to do this? Can I really get this done? And you were out there kind of reminding me, like, you said you wanted to do this, let's go. So I appreciate you for, actions over words. You not only said the words, but then you also took the actions and really backed up what you offered that day when you said you were going to help me.
You're very well. Look, you in the short amount of time you and I have known each other, you in what you've done and in the roles that you have and have held and currently have, especially being a woman in those roles, there's power there. I promise you, there's a little girl that's going to hear a podcast down the road and be like, I want to be like you. And why not? The world deserves to hear your story and what you do as a leader, being a woman and a leader in a fitness industry that's male dominated. Here you are saying, look, here's my flag in the sand, and here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I've done. The world needs to hear that.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I love how you show up in the fitness industry too. And that's a great segment to where we're going to go. And just I think you're a great leader right now in the fitness industry, but I want to go backwards a little bit
Yeah.
and go to your starting point, because you've literally had a full career in the fitness industry. And most people kind of weave in and out, and you've really kind of been in fitness from day one. So talk us through, why did you choose to pursue a career in fitness?
So I mean, it goes back to high school. I think it was 10th grade, between 10th grade and actually, no, my junior and senior year. I ended up getting a trainer to help me get ready for football my senior year. And that, you know, over that summer, we worked one on one, 2, 3 times a week. And I came into that senior year best fit ever, in shape, strong, fast. And that was kind of what started this whole trajectory for me to be like, like if this person, like I know how I felt before I started working with a trainer, and I knew how I felt once I stopped working with this trainer, and I wanted to be able to do that with others. And part of it, it led to physical therapy. I wanted to get, so I have a master's in rehabilitation because I wanted to be a physical therapist, and I wanted to help get people out of pain. I saw, my dad got hurt at work. This was years ago. And just the amount of pain he was in from hurting his shoulder, hurting his back. I wanted to kind of start, I wanted to work with people similarly, and started that trajectory. Unfortunately, physical therapy and insurance don't see eye to eye, and they wanted you to go get a PhD. And I was like, man, I'm done with school. Like, I don't want to go to any more school. And sales for me, I think that curiosity element for me came through when I was a trainer, and sales came really easy to me, and got promoted to fitness manager. And but that's where it all started. I saw the impact of working with a trainer that it had on me, and I wanted to be able to have that same level of impact on those that I worked with.
I love that that's the start, because you do have just this true start in fitness, which is like on the fitness side, on the training side. But then you weave to sales, and then you weave to operations, and then you weave into like leadership focus. And so, like, talk to me about the evolution, and were you plotting the evolution, or did it just kind of magically happen?
It was both, really. I came through the PT side, and that's kind of where I earned my stripes as a personal trainer to fitness manager. But you're so siloed, right? So when I was interviewing for positions above fitness manager, whether it be general manager or above that, a regional role, it was always you don't have four wall operation understanding, right? You just have fitness. So I felt like I was just siloed in this one position, and I'm grateful because I got to work and run multiple locations as a regional director of fitness, but I wanted more. And so I ended up going into operations. I don't know if you know Ingrid Owen. I worked with her at 24, and then we just happened to, she was the GM of a club in Northern California. I reached out to her, became her director of operations, and that just kind of gave me, I knew fitness, I knew sales and membership, and now working with her, it helped me understand operations. And that kind of completed that wheelhouse of sales, membership, operations. So now when I speak to that next director of fitness role or a general manager role, I know every aspect. It was strategic, and the timing was perfect.
I know that you're also passionate about the leadership piece, and either directly in leadership roles or just being a mentor within the fitness facility.
Yeah.
And I think simultaneously there's a sense that if you're starting as a fitness trainer, you're stuck, or there's not that path to make a good living in fitness. And I'm obviously so passionate about the fact that you can make a career in the fitness industry. But how do you, as someone who, might be coming into your past facility, or even coming into your team right now, and they're young, and and they're hungry on the fitness side and they love fitness, how do you kind of like advise them or coach them as to how to set themselves up to have a great career in fitness for the longevity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one, and in my earlier career, I was bad at this, is sitting down with a trainer and really understanding, like, financially, what is it, how much do they need to be making in order to make this work, right? Because I think like I said, I did this too early in my career. It was all about what can you do for me, and what can you do for my club, and how can you help us hit this number, and not, hey, PT, what is it going to take, and how much you need to make per month, and how many clients is that going to take, and how many sessions per week is that going to take in order to get to that number. I think if I now, as 23 years later, if I'm sitting down with a trainer, it's all about, all right, what's that bottom line, and what's that number look like, and then let's back into a plan so that I know and they have full autonomy, right? There's no more of, well, I didn't know how much I needed to make, and I didn't know how. Here's the plan, let's go execute. And now it's a follow-up. How are we doing on that execution? And do we need to make pivots and adjustments along the way? But as a PT, you've got to know what you need to make every month to be able to make this work. Otherwise, you're just shooting in the dark. When you get that first paycheck, you got to understand, as a trainer, there's about a 90 to 120 day ramp up before you've got a healthy book of business. And if you don't know that and don't plan out like that, you're gonna get stuck. That first paycheck, you're not gonna expect it, and you're gonna be like, man, like, I don't know if this is for me.
Yeah, I think turnover is a huge problem in fitness, and maybe because of some of the things that you're talking about, just like setting up those conversations very early on. But if you had advice to give to a club owner that's listening or a boutique studio owner that's listening, and they can't seem to hire and retain their talent, what advice would you share for those people?
From a club owner, club operator, and if we're not, there's got to be a reason why they're not, we can't retain them, right? Because you got to understand, trainers don't get into this to make money per se right away. There's a passion there, and so one, are we tying the mission of the company or the brand to the purpose of the trainer? What do the visions match? Does the purpose match, right? Does the culture match what they're looking for? And then, more importantly, in that interview process, are we setting the expectation, right? Because I think, for me, I know the mistake I made when I was running clubs was I never set the expectation at the beginning. We just hired trainers for the sake of hiring a trainer, and now you go back and try to set the expectation. It's like, well, hey, that was never told as part of the interview process. So for me, I think now, if I'm talking to a club owner and operator, set your expectations at the very beginning, put it all out on the table during that interview to make sure that they understand what you're looking for, and does it match what they're looking for. And if it doesn't, don't pursue it. Otherwise, it just becomes a headache later on. And now this retention revolving door will keep happening because we're not setting the expectation at the very beginning.
Yeah, and I'm on the marketing side, and so I see it in the same but different lens, like set the expectation of like what's happening, but then also be clear about who we are as a
Yeah.
brand and what are our values and what do we stand for, and make sure there's that alignment so that you're all working toward the same thing as opposed to just presenting it like it's a job, and then you're disappointed when there is that turnover, or when it's treated like it's just a job. Like if you want people to be bought in with you or be owners with you, then you really have to kind of be bought in with them.
Yeah, and part of that is what's important to, I think it's also trying to understand what's important to them, right? What gets them out of bed every morning, or what gets them excited to come to work. And it can't be about the number, because it's not that. That's important to you. Club owner, club operator. Yes, I know when I operated clubs, that bottom line, what we got to at the end of the month, that was important to me, but that's not important to them. And I think when you lose sight of that and it becomes a job and it becomes about a number, and a trainer feels like they're just a dollar sign in the pod, they're gonna leave, because it's no longer purpose driven, it's profit driven. And so how do you keep it purpose driven, and how do you keep it around aligning both values, the club and the trainer? You do both. I mean, sales will come organically because they're excited to show up to work every day because what they value aligns with the company values.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm just going to push on this because I think it's a hot topic in fitness right now and I just want you to keep your club operator hat on. But if you were sitting as a club operator right now or you were a team leader and you had some members of your team who were Gen X, some members of your team who are millennials, some members of your team who are Gen Z, are you aware of the generation? Are you aware of people's like ages? And are you as a leader plugging in with them in different ways, or do you really approach your leadership and management the same regardless of who you're connecting with?
It's you can't. I think you have to approach each one uniquely. What a Gen Z millennial, we know the world they grew up in was the cell phone, right? That is the world they live in. That is the TikTok, the Snapchat, the Instagram. You know, so as an operator, and I did this when I ran clubs. How do we maximize that, right? Maybe it's helping them. All right, how do we help you build your clients by using what you like to use, but make sure that it sits underneath the brand standard and expectations. But yes, an older member or an older PT, meaning my age, 35 to 45, or a younger PT, you can't approach them the same way. You've got to approach each one specifically because the grind, the hard work, putting in the hours, maybe how you speak to an older PT, but a younger PT, what excites them is, does the vision of the company align with my vision, my core values, and my bigger purpose? And if you can do that, you'll get that younger demographic. And guess what? They're on social media, so they will hype up your club because they were so excited to come to work versus trying to motivate them the way you'd motivate an older PT or older team member.
I love that you take the one-on-one approach, just like a true personal trainer would. So let's transition into what you're doing right now. Talk to us about your new role, what you're doing when you started it, and what you're most excited about.
Yeah, so about a month ago, let me kind of back up so there's some context to this. In the role I had, director of fitness, that was my dream. I mean, you're talking about a dream role in the fitness industry is having the influence across multiple clubs, right? Multiple hundreds of PTs, fitness managers, thousands of members and clients. That was my dream role. But in reality, as I now turned 42 here, about 3 days ago, I turned 42. For me, priorities shift, man. Like I think I got to the point where I still wanted to be in fitness, but I was getting to the point where I was like, you know what? The day-to-day grind, the closeouts, the 14-hour days, the always being on call, just wasn't aligning with what I wanted to do in the next chapter of college. And so, I love to travel and I want to travel. And I have two stepkids that are going to graduate high school here soon and in the next couple of years. And my wife and I are going to have an ability to go see the world. And I don't want to be tied to something where I can't leave. And so, I started looking for another opportunity. And luckily, Les Mills had that opportunity. So now in my role, in the fitness industry, everyone's heard about Les Mills or at least Body Pump. Maybe you don't know Les Mills, but you know Body Pump. And then so Group X was you talk about a whole new world. I came from the one-on-one PT world. So Group X was always siloed somewhere over there. So the running joke is now you got a director of fitness in a Group X, with a Group X brand. But man, the one thing I can tell you is I didn't realize how much Group X played such a huge role in the retention of members at a club. Like it is a machine when you run it right, and just the in-depth work it takes to run a true group training Group X program. Man, it was eye-opening, and so that gets me excited. I think now it's really trying to understand this Gen Z millennial member base. I think that's the one thing right now. I know Les Mills with some of the programming that's come out and coming out. It is Gen Z, as Gen Z in mind, to where it's a lot of the strength and hit and some of the types of training the Gen Z millennial demographic likes to do to help get them really from the full, because guess what? You go into your club now, where's everybody at? Where is that younger member base at? Well, they're on the strength floor, and now your studio's sitting empty. So now I get to still talk club owners, club operators, but more around how do we enhance Group X, or now group training, right? How do we retain more members, and how do we get that Gen Z millennial member base into the group training studio?
I just want to know if you showed up to your first body pump class with your lifting straps and your lifting shoes.
Lesson learned. Here's a lesson for everybody. Put your ego aside, especially if you're a guy listening to this, and do not think you're going to lift heavy weights at a body pump class, because you will be sore for 5 days. And that's personal. That's a personal testimony to me taking body pump for the first time. You talk about how many reps you do in a body pump class. Big mistake. So now I go like 10 pounds, 15 pounds. I'm good now.
Yeah, it's amazing how clubs batch together fitness to get, and it really is a whole different world or mentality to be a one-on-one fitness arena versus a group class setup. And there is so much of the community element that comes in, and the vibe and the energy that impacts Group X that you can't replicate in one-on-one. And I think when so many clubs are trying to get to community, or maybe they're using the word community in their marketing, Group X to me is something that actually legitimately speaks to community really directly and like brings people together. Do you see it in that same way?
Yeah, because it's the one place where you are in there amongst the masses, right? And you've got others with you in the room where, yeah, a lot of those, and you come to the consistent class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's the consistent instructor, and they're hanging out after after the class. They all get coffee or go somewhere. So yeah, I don't think you have community without Group X and group training. I think the challenge now is that community where it's almost it's kind of gone, really. Especially those clubs that haven't really identified, hey, I have this Gen Z member base. They're on the strength floor, but my studio's sitting empty. How do we get them into the studio? I think those are some of the things now that with Les Mills that are coming out, and some of the programs designed specifically for that, because we know 80% of your member base right now is Gen Z millennial, and they're on the strength floor. How do we get them in the group training studio? And because what's going to happen is you don't build that community. They don't have buy into the brand. They don't love the brand. What's going to happen in 6 months? They're all going to leave, and they leave as a community. They come in and sign up 5 at a time. Guess what? They're going to leave 5 at a time. And so what does that do to retention? Well, now there's this revolving door where you're going to have to acquire so many more members, when we can just figure out how do we keep them in the club and keep them involved in some of the things, especially group training, that a club has to offer.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you think the instructor is to that equation?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's a 10. Like, I think what I've learned now is it is huge, because if you've got a rock star instructor who knows how to communicate, knows the choreography, has the energy, and knows how to connect, not just communicate, but connect with the member base, they will stay 3-4 times longer, because they love the member, they love the instructor, and those instructors, guess what? They refer people. The people that attend their class refer people, and now you talk acquisition and retention. I mean, I think as an operator, that's your gold mine. How do I get more members? How do I keep them longer? And how do we get them involved in some ancillary programs like PT? But in the middle, the heart of that sits group training, Group X.
And then as you're thinking about this new era that we're in with digital products out there, whether app-based or, TV screen based or even in club based, but it's digital versus an in-person with instructor kind of experience, where do you land on how those two things fit together?
We call it an omni fitness approach to training now, right? You've got the live, you've got the virtual, and you've got kind of the on demand. I got access to an app on my own through my phone, right? So as a club, yeah, you got to think as a club owner. If I'm looking at my club as an owner operator, how many hours a day does that studio sit empty? Probably a few 4, 5, 6 hours a day. So why not have a virtual component to what you offer? So not only now as a member, maybe I can only get to the club at 1 o'clock, but you don't have any group training classes, but you have a virtual program where I can go in, pick the class I want, or you preset the classes. And now I can virtually take a body pump class, just following the instructor on the screen. And then so now I'm offering 10, 15, 20 more classes per week. But the cool part is your payroll doesn't go up. Right? You're not having to pay an instructor, but now you're meeting the members where they are and now offering them a virtual on-demand component. And then obviously the digital through an app, we know members are still working out at home, right? We know members are still mixing up between live in the club and at home. So having an app that you can white label that offers, and I'm going to say Les Mills program or any programming, where now a member in your club can take and work out at home. You now have this omni fitness approach to your health club that's touching the member in 3 different components.
I totally agree. And you mentioned your experience with a personal trainer early in your athletic career. And one of my most important relationships when I was in my influential teen years was with a personal trainer. And when people ask me about the digital space, it's really hard for me to see a place where a 100% digital world has the same impact as that face-to-face component. So if I'm leaning one way or the other, I'm definitely leaning toward the people side. But I think, like you said, we do have to look at it like an omni kind of experience. Like, what are they doing when they're not face to face with someone? Like, what tools are we offering when they can't get booked into a class, or they don't have the same hours that a class is happening? So I think it is. I think there's got to be a mix of both. I definitely give a higher percentage to the in person, but maybe that's also because I'm old. So I think it's going to change as this next generation's coming up.
I think there's still I don't see live going away, right? I think the challenge, because we need, just from who we are as humans, we need that face to face, skin to skin. We need to be around other people. We're community made just by our DNA. So I don't think the live component goes away, but it can't be all that you have, because you've got this demographic, this 18 to 25-year-old demographic that grew up in a digital world. They have apps, whether it's Nike or some of the Apple app or whatever app. They have apps that they exercise that they're already using for whatever strength or training or exercise program they're doing. So to not be thinking like that, you're almost doing yourself a disservice, because now those members just coming to your club isn't going to be enough. Why not offer a digital component where it's still under the club's brand, but now it's something we offer our members as part of a membership, so that you're still being able to interact with them. I can two-way message you through an app, but it's under that club, but you're meeting that member where they're at.
Yeah, we are sitting here recording this about 2 weeks out from Ursa, and I would imagine it's going to be a hot topic at Ursa, is just that handshake between in person and digital. What are you, I guess, if you had a magic ball and could look into the future for the fitness industry, what are you most excited about, and what do you really hope that we collectively really start to lean into?
I think, the exciting piece right now for me is really, I love now that not only are we looking at our member base completely different now, right? We know that if we as club owners and operators don't understand how to interact and engage with this younger member base that's signing up, we're going to be, in about 3-4 years, we're going to be in a situation where we're like, man, what happened, right? Where'd they all go? So it's exciting for me to be working with a brand like Les Mills that's actually thinking ahead and understanding, like, hey, we now have programming that meets that member base where they're at. And it's strength based. It's what they love to do. There's no choreography, which is what they also love to do. So it speaks to that specific member base. That's exciting. The recovery, the wellness, I think we're now taking a different approach from fitness. It's not just the workout anymore. It's this, wellness ecosystem. And inside that sits fitness, nutrition, mental health, stress management. And I think it's exciting that we're seeing clubs build recovery components into their health clubs, into the actual build out of a club now. And it's not this afterthought thing. Texas Family Fitness, they just opened a brand new club not too long ago. And there's a whole recovery center that has the hydro massage, the cold chair, the regular hydro massage. We've got the hyperized, the guns. So there's definitely this recovery, and I don't see it changing. I think if nothing else, it's going to intensify, and it's going to become, you're going to see more and more clubs do it. What's scary, and I think what's something we've got to start understand is the level of our trainers, the education of our trainers needs to change. I think now a PT to be successful now has to understand stress management, has to understand mental health, has to understand nutrition, recovery. If not, man, you got to understand if Jessica had a hard day and had meetings all day, her state of readiness may not be ready to do a heavy back squat workout. But if you're not in tune with your PT client, and I put you under a heavy squats, you're going to get hurt. And so I think how we educate, how we certify our trainers needs to change.
Dig into that. What's the next layer to that? Because I'm NASM certified, and that gives me the ability to coach someone through a movement. But how would you add on to that, either through continuing certifications or continuing credits, or is it a whole different, because right now nutrition, even as you mentioned, it's a totally different path education wise, and then mental health is a totally different path education wise. So if you were to draw it up for NASM or in your own school, we'll just go Khaled School right now. Like, how would you create the next school for personal trainers?
Right. And it definitely can't be, NASM is NASM, and NASM is great at what it does around the OPT model, whether it's squat, program design, but NASM doesn't understand mental health or any cert really, unless they've, now you see more, they're coming out with certifications around behavioral management, behavioral coaching. So they're starting to understand, hey, look, this is something that's happening. Let's come up with a certification that helps the PT understand how to speak to that situation with their client. I think part of it falls on the trainer. I really think, because you're not going to have a company invest thousands upon thousands of dollars into its trainers if they're not going to see an ROI, right? So part of that also understands, as a PT, if I want to get paid more, then I am educated. I know what I'm talking about. I understand behavior. I understand, and I'm not saying you have to be a mental health specialist, but you got to be able to understand, hey, how was your day? Stress level 1 to 5. Did you eat today? Being able to ask some of those questions. But yes, you've got to go invest in your own education.
And then there's so many different wearables, and there's so many different tools that our members have access to, and they're not all going to be using the tool that we give them or recommend to them. So do we know enough about their Whoop score, or whatever they're wearing? Do we know how to look at those numbers through all the different tools to be able to give the most effective workout so it's almost like we have so much information, and now it's like arming the right people with the right information to deliver a workout that gets results.
For sure. And I think yes, it's understanding what is the story the data is telling me, and now how can I kind of break down that story to understand what's going on with my client, and then make whatever adjustments I need to make from there. The thing with apps right now, is I don't know. I'm going back and forth with apps, and specifically, I've talked to a couple people that have the Aura Ring, and what's funny is it's causing them to be more stressed out about wearing the Aura Ring to make sure they got the right level of sleep. And so they wake up already in an unrested state. And it's like, well, what's the point of the Aura Ring? And that could be any app. Those are two conversations that came to mind. But the whole purpose of the app is to help you with health and wellness, not create stress.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can get obsessed as a consumer, you can get
Yeah.
obsessed with data, let alone as a personal trainer that needs to be looking at all of the data. And I think it's having awareness as a personal trainer also. Am I working with an obsessive kind of client? And if so, maybe I don't recommend the Aura Ring or I don't recommend my Fitness Pal. Whereas if you're working with a hyper competitive athlete, maybe that's
Yeah.
exactly what they need. And so it is so we have all of the tools to be able to prescribe the right things to the right people, but it's just breaking down all of the different things that are available and knowing that they're all owned by different people and then all the consumers have their own choices to make of what they're
Well,
going to play in. So it's really
yeah.
this fascinating time.
Well, I think it is. It's exciting because, man, there's so much data now that you can, anyway, a PT can have about their one client. But is it important? I think you've got to remember, is it important for the client? Like all that stuff is important to me, a PT. It's great to have all that information. Does the client actually care? All right. Is it important to them? So yes, it goes back to, do you know the personality type of your client? And if by doing so, I know how to speak to that client. And so, yeah, maybe speaking about the result, if you're a type D, yeah, I want to know. I want to know what's going on because that's my personality. But if I'm speaking to somebody else that's maybe a little bit more conscious, do I really want to tell them, hey, you're stressed out today? Because that's going to throw off their entire day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just having awareness around that. Um I want to take a left turn because we kind of started with your podcast, which is Rise Up the Show. And and when I was talking to you, we talked a lot about my rise up and my comeback season. But
Yeah.
I want to kind of put the spotlight on you and really dig into your big comeback moments because there's always a time when, you're kind of like down and you're wondering like what am I going to get out of this? So take us to a time when you were low and and how did you drive through that time and how did you get yourself back up to, a positive place?
So November 2019. So I'll never forget it. So like I said earlier, I used to have my own fitness business conference. And when I moved to Dallas back in 2018, 2019, we were starting to plan a Dallas, Texas event. And I got in a little over my head, right? We signed the lease or the rent agreement at a Marriott. There were sponsors. We had ticket sales, but it was things started falling apart. Um, it's not enough sponsors came in, not enough ticket sales were happening. I ended up owing about $100,000 all in to this hotel and some other things, and I ended up having to file for bankruptcy. And I remember that day. This was February 2020. Refunded what I could refund. Obviously, I couldn't refund everything because I did pay for some things, and so come February, I filed for Chapter 11, and I owed $100,000, and part of that, why I say November 19th or November 2019 is, as that was happening, my car was breaking down, my transmission was starting to go out, and I remember this day where I was driving home, and my car kept going in and out, and I pulled into a parking lot, and I look up, and it's a church parking lot. And I
Hmm.
think that was when you talk about like, God, are you here? God, are you listening? God, where are you? It was pretty much like slap in the face. Here I am. And that's what started it for me. I think that started the turnaround. It wasn't quick. I'd never been a believer. But it definitely started the conversations of, all right, I need to start going to church. I need to get more around understanding God and that relationship with God. Um, I think the lesson in this thing is my ego got the best of me, and the event became about Khaled and not what the purpose of the event was. But it also showed me who true friends were and who was truly there. Because I'll tell you what, till this day, I don't talk to anybody that was a part of that event, and it is what it is. You learn real quick who's in your corner and who's not. And so that started my turnaround moment. And from there, I got laser focused on, I wanted to be the best director of fitness that I could be. I wanted to learn, I wanted to grow in the corporate world. And that's what I did. But it was that February 2019 to February 2020. That's kind of the window right there. Excuse me.
It's that's 3 years ago. 4 years ago. I mean, it's crazy that that you were at that point and have like literally spent the last 3.5, 4 years like in a comeback season. And I appreciate you sharing that you were in that moment. And I think sometimes maybe social media causes everyone to glaze over the fact that bad stuff happens. And when I was on your show, we were talking about, within the last 12 months, the things that I was working through. And so I think we need more transparency around like, here's the wins, but there's also losses, and you're going to lose if you're doing big stuff. Like you were trying to organize a fitness and, motivational event in parallel to your full-time job, and then you feel like down in the dumps because it doesn't work out. Meanwhile, you were really trying to do something really, really big. And I think it's always amazing, like how do you come back out of those moments, and do you play small in your comeback, or do you just kind of like get right back out there and you're like, I'm going to go and like play big again?
Yeah, it's and do I look back? I always look back at it, right? There was some really close, at that time, I felt important relationships that, and mind you, there were some things that I did that I'm not too happy about, that jeopardized some of those relationships, and it got the best of me. And I think, though those times definitely test your character. And my character was tested, and unfortunately, at that time, it wasn't the right character, and I had to do some work on me personally. And that's what the last 3 years have been, is trying to define who I am, who I want to be. And understand that God leads the way. Humility, gratitude, I think for me are two of my biggest core values now that probably weren't there 3 years ago, but I had to go through that journey to be who I am today.
I love that. And I think you do learn so much about yourself when you're in the mud, when you're in that
Oh
comeback season. Um, because you helped me so much, I'm going to give you the floor and let you either tell me or tell the people, like, what help do you need right
I
now?
think, I took some time away from the podcast, right? As I was going through this journey, I just didn't feel comfortable doing the podcast. And then now I'm back doing it on a regular basis. So what really, the biggest thing for me is, man, and it's even not about me. There are people on that show who've gone through an amazing journey on their own, that I want to get the word out and share their journey with the world. And so the one ask I would have is, rise up the show. We'll drop the link. Give us a follow. Listen to these episodes. I promise you, reach out to any of these amazing people that were guests on my show, and that they will respond back and help you out. But I want to get their word out. I want their story to get out, because it's not just my story. But if someone hears Jessica's story through Rise Up the Show and they change their life, I want to know about that. Jessica wants to know about that. So I think that's the ask. YouTube, it's at Khaled Elmasri. All the videos of the show are there, and then we'll post the link to the show. A follow would be huge, and then reach out to these guests and get some help. If you need help, get some help. They will help you out.
Yeah, I think that's so important with how you've approached your podcast and how I aim to approach mine. Is I'm talking to people who are in the mud right now, doing work in the weeds, still reachable. So if there's something that's said that you like or that you want to dig into more, just reach out to the person and ask
Yeah,
for more insight. And
yeah,
I don't want it to be that, Ed Milet size or Gary Vee size, where you just you wonder and you can't connect, but you can definitely connect at this size. I respond to everything on
yeah.
LinkedIn, you know that. Um, one final maybe open-ended question. Is there anything that's on your mind that we haven't talked about? Anything that you've been maybe working through with mentees that you work with? just anything that you want to say in your own story that we haven't had a chance to say.
I think the one thing I can definitely share is about 3 months ago, I hired a coach, right? And this goes back to the importance of having a coach and a mentor. So yes, while I've mentored others, I have a coach that mentors me. And there was a point in the last few months where you start, I was kind of losing my way and losing sight of who I am. And we did this exercise, and he calls it your essence, finding your essence, or your words of greatness. And it was such a great exercise to where there's a list of words: gratitude, connector, communicator, love, joy, impact, whatever it is. And the exercise is, on that list of words or on that sheet, circle the words that resonate with you. Whether are you a connector? Are you a communicator? Do you sit in gratitude? Are you a servant leader? The end result of that is, now I have my words of essence, to where when I show up to a podcast, I read my 5 words before I show up to the podcast. For me, it's gratitude, it's connector, it's communicator, it's servant leader, and it's joy, right? Those are my 5 words. And so for me, it's a state of being, right? So no matter what I'm doing now, am I being in those words of essence? And if not, I take a step back, read those words, and it puts me back into who I am, versus always figuring out, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do this. And so I think for anyone listening, I would challenge you: what are your 5 words? What are your words of essence? No matter whoever you are, you've got certain things that this is, no matter what you're doing, this is who you're being. And as long as you remember who you're being, the doing has meaning to it.
And it reminds me of that quote that, the first step is to understand what your gifts are, or understand what your 5 words are. And the second step is to give them away to the world. And I just want to thank you for sharing your gifts with the world, and maybe more specifically sharing your gifts with me, because you definitely have, and I appreciate you for that. So these show notes are going to be legit. We're going to put all the tools into the show notes so you guys can follow up on your own essence words, like all of the things. More podcast homework for you. But thank you so much for being on the Society Pod with us today, Khaled. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. Like I said, I'm proud of you. Episode 2. We'll have to do another one, episode 50.
Episode 50. We're gonna bring this all back. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Society Pod.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.